students, it's Dr. Menchaca Bañulo, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Rome. So, the resources you'll need for this small discussion are your Horace poem that I uploaded to Tracks, On Duties excerpt, which I assigned you to read, and also notes on Rome that I uploaded to Tracks for you to read. And there I want you to pay particular attention to Polybius's account of checks and balances in Rome and how that fits with our American institutions, and to Cicero's discussion of the natural law as well as to the life of Cicero. I'm going to go ahead and begin by kind of orienting you to what I want you to know about Rome. The notes that I uploaded for you are called Roman coda. And you know, a coda is in music, you return and you kind of redo the same thing. Sometimes there are minor changes. So one of the important things about Rome is that in many ways Rome appropriates what happens in Greece. But there are ways that they make changes, and there are ways that they take it further. What happens with Rome is that you have a situation where the Greek Empire is in twilight. And it's the Romans that kind of rise to the occasion to become the new source of power in the Mediterranean, and later the new source of power in the West. So I'll also talk to you about that change. All right, this is the end of this clip, and the next clip you'll talk about is Horace, followed by another clip on the history of Regulus, followed by a clip on Cicero and on duties on Regulus, and concluding with some reflections on Polybius. Okay, on to Horace. This is a poem called No Surrender, and it's by a Roman poet named Horace, who you might be familiar with. And what he does here is he retells the story of a hero named Regulus. Now, this is the story of Regulus, which you should have picked up from your readings, but this is what's going to be referred to here, and also referred to in Cicero, and later referred to in Augustine. Regulus was a general in Rome, a republican general, so not during the time of the empire. And what happens is they're engaged in extended wars with Carthage, and these wars are for supremacy in the Mediterranean. Now, Regulus is captured, and it's the case that the Romans are in a position where they don't want to give in to Hannibal. Hannibal's doing pretty well. He's putting up a really good fight. Carthage and Hannibal are a real existential threat for them. When Regulus is captured, Hannibal makes a proposal to Regulus, which is that if Regulus returns to Rome, and if while in Rome he convinces the Romans to make a prisoner exchange, then Regulus can remain in Rome. However, if he goes to Rome and he fails to make the prisoner exchange, then he needs to come back to Carthage and die for not having made the prisoner exchange. Now, Regulus agrees to this arrangement, and he also takes a vow to the gods that if he fails to make this deal, he will return to Carthage to die. Now, when he gets to Rome, he convinces the Senate not to take the deal. He says, the deal's bad for us. It will not be good to release the particular Carthaginian prisoners that Hannibal wants in this exchange, and it's not good for us to surrender in this way to make this kind of deal. You can kind of think of it as it's not good to negotiate with terrorists kind of thing, right? If you want to contextualize it for now. So after he convinces the Senate of this, he still returns home. I mean, no, not home, but he returns to Carthage. And when he gets to Carthage, he dies in this terrible way. He's executed. And he is kind of a hero for that. He's this example of somebody who keeps his promises and has the kind of integrity to not be afraid of Carthage, and to not be afraid of death. So what does Horace say about this? If you start with the beginning of the poem, Horace says, "We believe thunderous Jupiter rules the sky. Augustus is considered a god on earth for adding the Britons and likewise the weight of the Persians to our empire." Okay, so it sounds like that Rome is great, Caesar is a god, the way Jupiter is a god. Okay, so it sounds very praising. However, in the next paragraph, or the next passage, because it's a poem, what he does is he completely annihilates this idea that there's some sort of virtue in imperial Rome. Instead, he depicts it as soft, lazy, and corrupted. Now, Regulus makes an appearance in the third passage, sort of coming back from the dead in a way, and explaining that it's shameful to surrender. Okay? And it's shameful to surrender, and not only is it shameful, but it's imprudent. Because soldiers who know that if they are captured, that they'll be saved, they're not going to try so hard to fight for Rome. Okay, they're not going to fight to the death. This is what Regulus is saying in this poem. Okay, so when you get onto the next page, you have the passage, "When a doe that's set free from the thick hunting nets turns to fight, then he'll be brave who trusts himself to enemies, and he'll crush Carthage in a second battle, who's felt the chains on his fettered wrists without a struggle, afraid of dying." So there you kind of have this sort of like, well, surrendering will make Rome strong on the day that pigs will fly. Okay, that's what's going on there. And you jump again to a description of the historical Regulus. This is how it ends, with a discussion of how he sets aside his wife's kisses and his children's embraces, and he says goodbye to his friends. And he returns to Carthage, setting his manly face, right, to return to Carthage and face death. Another interesting point is that at the end, you see that he's depicted as strengthening the Senate's purpose. Now, particularly, he strengthens the Senate's purpose by making himself an example. And this is important. He makes himself an example in two ways. Okay, the first way he makes himself an example is by being willing to die, obviously, like saying, I'm okay with this arrangement, even though it means the loss of me, and so I understand the soldiers who will also be losing their life by not being rescued in this prisoner exchange. But there's a deeper sense, which is that the prisoner exchange would have been for the sons of noble families. So noble Carthaginians and noble Romans, right? So a lot of the senators there are going to have sons who are involved in this prisoner exchange, who could come home, right? So when Regulus says this is against the interest of Rome, right, and he steals their purpose, he firms it up by being willing to die, because what he's also asking them to do is to not rescue their sons or cousins or nephews, right? And this is a part of what's going on in that poem. So the picture you really have that emerges here is this idea of this Roman who loves justice, right? Even more than his own life. And a part of justice for him is keeping his vows to the gods, but also of making sure that Rome is in a position where Rome can win, right? That's how seriously he takes Rome. And weakness is surrender, because a soldier and a general like him should prefer to die than to lose. And those are kind of the lessons that emerge from that.